Welcome to the Mike on Much podcast. I'm your host, Mike Veerman. I'm here with my friend and trusted producer, Max Kerman, as well as our pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham, and intern Erica is back on the ones and twos. Guys, today is a more conventional episode because we have a guest today. Friend of the pod, second time appearing, K.Flay.
Yeah, we had such a good time doing Freedoms that we thought, are we ever going to go back to having real guests? But K.Flay deserves it.
Absolutely. Yeah, when K.Flay shows up, our friend Christine, that's when you go, oh, yeah, let's go back to guests.
Yeah.
We're not abandoning guests, dear listeners.
No. We love the feature interview, but it's got to be, we're raising the bar, I think, for quality of guests.
Yeah, so
we're not taking anybody. Not that we did before.
So we're getting, you're saying there's now like a...
Yeah.
You're a gatekeeper, Max.
I am. I'm going to be vigilant.
So it has to be K.Flay or higher.
Yep.
Wow.
That's right.
So this episode, we're kind of trying something a little new. Normally we would just like catch up and then kind of set up the interview. But I think we're still going to try and do a hybrid of Freedom and then a conventional episode. So we're still going to talk about topics.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be like timeless stories that we used to tell. You know,
it's not going to be evergreen as we call it.
Yeah. We might just talk about what we did last night, which is actually kind of similar to what we used to do as well.
Yeah, no, I feel like we always kind of were like, we wouldn't be super topical. Like if there was like a mass shooting or like something political we want to talk about, then it would be dated. Yeah. But in general, it would almost be like, you know, oh, I went on this date or I did this, which could literally take place anytime in some ways.
But speaking of hybrids,
you
know, I wanted to open with something that is both timeless and evergreen and also a breaking story. Erica's brother has hickeys.
We were just talking about this off mic. Yeah.
Yeah, her 16-year-old bro has hickeys. Did you guys have hickeys?
I did, but not until like my late 20s, early 30s.
I was just saying, like, yeah, you get hickeys, but like it's when you first start kind of, making out, and it's like, oh no, I'm so embarrassed of my hickey, but you want people to see your hickey because it shows you're getting some sort of action. Like, so in like grade 9 or whatever it was, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm covering my hickey, but you don't really want to cover it. So I found it endearing when you came in and said your brother had like 12 hickeys on him. I'm like,
yeah. Well, we had a funeral to attend, unfortunately, the past couple of days.
Well, it brings out the weirdest in people.
Action at that funeral.
No. But that's like one of those places where you don't want the
You only live once.
Yeah.
Thought the body was stiff.
And also for our listeners, we already said our condolences and everything off air. We're seeming
we
a
can
little
do whatever
flip.
we want now.
But he went to my sister, who's 14, and asked her for her makeup prior to the visitation. Put some makeup on the neck. Didn't work very well. I saw it in the car on the way there. I lost my mind. Told my whole family. Everyone was making fun of him the whole time.
So the younger sister was in on it.
She knew, yeah.
So, wow.
She's pretty chill.
She helped with the cover-up.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
You know what they say? It's not the crime, it's the cover-up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Literally in this case.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a hickey, Max?
I'm sure I have, but not in a while. I mean, hickeys are one of those funny things, like when you step back and just sort of like view it kind of objectively, it's like you're just so riled up that you just start like sucking on their neck. It's just
it's ridiculous.
It's just like a funny, like kissing even to a degree is a funny thing when you step back. You're
Well,
like,
when was the last time you like made out with your long-term girlfriend?
Laura and I had a pretty good make-out the other day.
You still make out?
Sometimes, yeah.
Shane, do you still make out?
Yeah,
Alex
of course they do.
Loves making out. If you start kissing Alex and you don't pull away, she will never stop, ever.
Do you like making out still?
Well, with Alex, I get pressure because I'm always the one to pull away, and then it hurts her feelings. So I almost have like an adverse reaction to it now. I like making out in the heat of passion.
Yeah.
I don't like making out if it's like, oh, the Raptors scored. Sometimes I just want to go, mwah, and she'll be like, and I'm like, no, now I gotta hurt her feelings. But Alex is the first person ever to give me a hickey. Up until then, I did not know what a hickey was.
Seriously?
Yeah, I didn't know how they happened. I thought it was like a joke thing, like putting a vacuum to your neck or something. I didn't know what it was. Really.
Yeah.
Did your parents approve of the girlfriend and her naughty ways?
No, so of course my next step was to find out who this girl is.
Oh, you didn't even know her, some random.
No, he doesn't have a girlfriend or anything, and he went to a party on Saturday night and stayed the night.
Oh,
how old's your brother?
Man.
He's in grade 12.
Wow.
I was like, wow, Mom, tables have really turned since I was in the 12th grade.
Yeah, I think with
do any
each
of that
passing
crazy
kid,
stuff.
parents start to care less and less.
Do you
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
it's
totally.
a thing where it's like guys, like boys will be
Yes.
boys?
Yeah, definitely a double standard in my household too, with like what the boys are allowed to do and what the girls were allowed to do.
Is Jack going to school next year?
Fifth year.
Fifth year. Cool.
Victory lap.
Oh, he should just get out of there and start partying in college.
That's great advice, Max. Real nice. The singer of Arkells told me I should drop out, get more hickeys.
Oh no. Yeah, he listens. He listens to every episode, so
And he's cool with us talking about this.
Well,
You better be.
We'll find
listen,
out.
Listen, we have a lot of high maintenance friends who put their foot down and say, "You got to take that out of the pod. Stop." We're not listening to fucking Jack. Like, sorry, Jack. It's in the pod.
You don't have a say, Jack. Speaking of high maintenance friends that get upset, we talked about the strokes last night, and our great friend, the Nut. He just wanted us to clarify a few things. So I started seeing these texts this morning, a lot of for the record sort of stuff. So I said, okay, Birch, you write out exactly what you want us to say so that we can make corrections on the air about how we presented your relationship with Albert Hammond, which is fair because sometimes he does think that we misrepresent him. So he says, a bunch of Champagne Boys, this is how he met Albert Hammond Jr. and eventually got on a plane Absinthe in Hamilton in like 2008 or whatever.
In reference to our last episode.
To our last episode. So a bunch of Champagne Boys went to New York and Albert Hammond was at Brooklyn Bowl. I had liquid courage, went up to Albert and told him we did a cool weekly party in Hamilton, which is the Brooklyn of Toronto, and he should come play it. He put me in touch with his manager and we put together the deal. Also, when I picked him up, I took Greg and him, and Greg hit it off big time. This is my brother Greg, talking about movies, and I'm convinced to this day Greg and Albert could have been best friends if Greg would have stayed in touch. Greg has never seemed cooler.
But that's not his issue. All that stuff you mentioned, like he wanted to clarify with us. His issue is he doesn't want people thinking he lied on his Insta.
So what? I didn't quite understand that. Did he say something on his Insta that I'm missing?
Because I said that because you Max were saying that he met the manager to set up the deal,
Yeah,
and I was like,
thought.
oh, on his Instagram he said that he met Albert himself
directly
in person directly, and
fair
I thought, like it's Instagram, maybe he exaggerated as people tend to do. But Birchall wants to make it clear he didn't exaggerate. In fact, he told the exact truth that he met him at a bowling alley after getting.
And I got that wrong,
having
so I
liquid
apologize.
courage.
And he also wanted to say that he paid him way less than $10K, that Albert didn't do it for the money, that he did it to come and hang out.
But I will say this, he told me he did it for that. So he definitely lied to me because I really remember it because I'm a big, I'm going to ask you about the money question.
You do like to ask about the money.
Albert Hammond Jr.?
No, to
Birchall.
To Birchall. And he told me the amount, and I was like, how could it be that much and you guys still turn a profit? And he was saying it was more like a long-term thing to give Absinthe cachet. I really remember this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's since clarified and said it was not that much and that Albert did it for fun.
So he only lied to me. And I have another correction about the stroke show. I just got a message from Sean Dawson. He wanted to say that Nick Valenzi was wearing baggy khakis and a leopard print blazer.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. That's all, though. Just if we're doing strokes corrections. Yeah.
Well, we all do crazy things when we're kids, get hickeys, lie about booking an international musician, superstar. We all have different things that we do. Guys, what else are we talking about
Speaking
today?
of liquid courage, so I got to go to the Raptors game again.
Yes! Congrats to the Raps. They won last night. They evened the
What?
series of the conference finals with the Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee!
What a good game. It
Feels
was
great.
You know
The
what?
first team game they played, I feel like. Real team game.
And also, it was the first game that I haven't had a heart attack watching. Because I was like, by kind of middle of the third quarter, I'm like, I think we're good. I still didn't say that out loud, and I went with Mike D from the band, and he was like, "This is great." Like he was acting a little too confident.
Well, he's a newer Raptors fan, so he doesn't have like the years
baggage,
of the
yeah.
scarring that we all have.
Yeah, but in my mind, I was like, I think and everyone seems to be doing their part. Everyone's playing well, and it's really fun. It's actually great going with Mike D, who I've known since I was 17 years old. He was never really a basketball fan or a sports fan for that matter, but in the last 2 years, basically, he's become an obsessed hoops fan. I think part of it is because he's always been a Reddit guy, and he'd find himself on the NBA subreddit page occasionally. And if you're not into basketball, I think that's the best place to start because it's just the way it's presented on Reddit. You really have like a chance to find the most like entertaining
storylines
and little anecdotes, and you really get a sense of all the personalities and the best highlights. It's very easy to click around. So if you don't care about the Raptors but kind of want to get to know a little bit more about NBA culture, that's the place to start. So anyway, he's super into it. He's like obsessed with the Raptors in a really fun way.
Does he know his shit?
He kind of does. And Mike's a bit of a know-it-all too. So like
he probably like got super into it, started to
Yeah.
learn the nuances of the game. He came over to my place to watch Philly, like game 2, I believe. I had a bunch of people over, and yeah, he's a legit hoops fan now.
big hoops. Anyway, so we got these things, and we're so lucky, by the way. Actually, Lauren, as an aside, Lauren, who's in nursing school and working night shifts right now, we got into like a little bit of a spat the other day because her favorite band's The Strokes, and then it turned out she was scheduled to work, and so she's never seen The Strokes, so like she couldn't come to the Strokes concert, she couldn't come to another thing the previous week, And then her only night off was the Raptors game
last night.
And I was like, I got to go to this game. I'm like really sorry. and she did point out something. She's like, Max, the issue with your life at the moment is that you get offered some once in a lifetime experience about 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And she's like, just be aware of that. I was like, yeah, it's very true.
You know what you should? I was thinking about this because you were talking about this yesterday. You were a little stressed out because you were like, this is the one I could have brought Lauren to this. This is one of those things.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever think about maybe just like dropping $400 and buying you guys a couple tickets?
Of course not.
But like, you can afford tickets.
No, I know. Yeah, fun. I mean, the good thing is it was a late start, so I put in some dinner time. We went for ice cream.
Oh yeah, I know that trick.
Anyway, this is not.
This ice cream's great. You're just going super quick.
Shout out to Lauren. I'm gonna make it up to babe.
But did the spat really go like that? That seems very calm. If that's a big spat.
We have pretty calm spats for the most part. Yeah, she's very reasonable, and also like I like to think of myself as a pretty thoughtful partner. But anyway, that's.
Do you ever raise your voice? Are you ever like, shut up?
Shut up? No, I was gonna carry on, but no, not really.
Have you ever been so angry that you went, "Fuck you"?
No, but we do have a bit actually. Like when we're just joking around, where it would be like just for comedic purpose, we'd be like, "Fuck you, bitch." And she'll be like, "Fuck you, motherfucker." And then we're like laughing about it and saying it very loudly. But we have neighbors downstairs. We're on the second floor, and then after a while. And the insults become more and more aggressive.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder if they're listening to us right now.
That's
good bit.
hilarious.
Yeah. Also, that sounds like an alibi right now. Now that
I know exactly. No, it's just this thing we do, officer.
No. Actually, my friend Matt Fruckman, he always says that Lauren and I are 2 very reasonable people, and like we shouldn't be together just because we got to spread ourselves out. Because usually reasonable people should hook up with unreasonable people.
Even each other out.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not the point of it. The point is, at halftime, we were in this board of directors room, which is like a very kind of fancy room down in it's like on a lounge area.
So you're at the game. You and DZ are in this fancy area for guests.
At halftime, and who walks in? Adam Silver, who's the commissioner of the NBA.
Oh, I saw the photo. I was seething with jealousy.
I know,
and I almost didn't double tap because of my jealousy, but I went, nope, only good vibes for this Raps game, and I double tapped it because they were up and it was the second quarter. Swear to God, that was my thought process.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So and DZ had just watched like a half an hour long interview on Adam Silver like yesterday. So he's like, let's go say hi, and like he never wants to say hi to literally anybody. So I was like, fuck it, let's do it. So I go right up to him, say, hey, how's it going? And I was trying to think about like, what is my in here? Because I was like, okay, Adam Silver, and he's there with his wife too. So the first thing is I really try to include the wife in the conversation because I know from Lauren's experiences when people come up to me and don't give a shit about talking to Lauren, that's a bad feeling. So I really try to get her involved. Talked about where they live in New York, and my dad grew up in New York. So whenever anybody's like, oh, I live on the Upper West Side, I was like, oh, my dad grew up on the Upper West Side. So there's that point of connection. But then
So you just walked up to him and said, hey, where do you live?
No, I was like, hey, big fan. I think you're an awesome commissioner. Keep doing you. Like, because he's known between all the commissioners as the best, most progressive commissioner.
I love him.
He's awesome. And I've heard him in plenty of interviews. So I feel like I kind of know the guy. But I said, did you listen to the new Michael Lewis podcast? Because the first episode is called Ref You Suck. In the first half at the Raptors game, people were chanting, Ref You Suck.
Yeah.
And he was interviewed by Michael Lewis about that podcast. And I said, I've actually talked to Michael Lewis too. I'm a huge fan. I interviewed him for a Canadian magazine. I told him I was in a band. So we talked about that episode for a good 2 or 3 minutes. And then the other connection we had is Hamilton legend Ron Foxcroft, who invented the Fox 40 whistle, which is used by every professional referee across the world. The guy is a millionaire.
He has the book, I'm a Genius.
No, that's what it's called.
It's called something Genius.
Ron Fox. That sounds familiar. We talked about him on a pod.
He told the story
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the pod. And
But it's not called Genius. It's like, anyway, whatever it's called. He, so I said, and Ron's a friend of mine too. He's like, of course we know Ron. So we hit it off. He gave me his business card.
I saw that you put it in the. You texted. Did you text it or put it in the group?
I put it in the group.
Yeah.
Do you think that's his cell phone or his office number? It's got to be
only one way to find out. Let's call it.
Call him on the pod right now. Also follow him on Instagram. So I'm like, do you take those photos? Are they yours? He's like, of course they're my photos. Well, most of the time. So anyway, it was a real thrill.
Wait, so when did you talk to the wife? You set that all up without sort of saying.
Oh, I asked her like, what do you do? She's an artist. They live in New York. I tried to make the conversation.
That's
inclusive.
great.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a real thrill. And then the Raptors were winning. I was running to a bunch of friends that I knew. It was awesome. It was a great night.
Can we talk a bit about Drake? I feel like he's getting more unhinged. He was massaging the coach. There was a photo that went around of him holding the coach's shoulders. Yeah. And there was a article that was sent to me today by my friend Carl Armstrong, and the headline was, this is in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, Milwaukee totally hates Drake, who doesn't own the Raptors but is somehow allowed to freely roam the court.
What was the tweet you sent last night, which is very funny?
It's a still of Drake massaging Nick Nurse, the Raptors coach, on the sideline, and this guy named Dan Klein goes, "This isn't a big deal. I've done this even when I have nosebleed seats. Security lets you through as long as you say you're just stepping on the court to rub a coach's shoulders."
That was very
It's
funny.
absurd. And I find it fascinating. I personally think Drake is great for the team, and I think a lot of people forget when they made him the global ambassador 6 years ago now, the team was terrible. Like, we needed the rub off from Drake's celebrity more than, like, basically the Raptors stock was so low that Drake associating with us was more of a risk to Drake. Shockingly, over these next half decade, the team got so good that now they're kind of on par. Like, it's a sort of like more symbiotic, like mutually beneficial relationship. But people forget, like, Drake put his name on the team when he was at his highest stock, and the Raptors were like this shitty team that never even made the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a couple of things. One, I think because we watch every Raptors game and we see him all the time, we've sort of grown a little bit tired of his antics. But if you don't really pay attention to the Raptors, but then you tune in occasionally for the playoffs and you're like, Drake's there, and you're just some like random person from New Orleans or Houston, you're like, oh yeah, it's like the Raptors, Toronto's kind of cool. I didn't even know, because when I've been in the South, or just various parts of America, some people don't even realize that Drake's from Toronto. So I'd be like, I'm Toronto, and Drake, whatever. They'd be like, oh yeah. So I think for the casual fan, it's actually like, it actually is star power in the way like when Jay-Z sits like
Or
courtside,
Jack Nicholson or any of that shit.
Yeah. So, but the question I have is just like, I wonder how quickly does he wear off, like when it comes to like a new Raptor going, oh sweet, I get to meet Drake. Like, when does that feeling wear off? Is it like 3 weeks into the season, we're like, Drake's here again?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I think about that all the time. Like, it's really cool at first. It's like, oh man, like he might put me in a song, and it's like, man, he's really sort of like bum rushing me every time I come off the court for high fives. And, giving me full on bear hug, and it's like, dude, it's only the second quarter.
he's so demonstrative.
Shane described him in a funny way. We were texting last night after the game, like about how he's like an enthusiastic kid, or maybe that was this morning.
Was I?
Like, you're saying, like the way that he can't actually like take the game in like cool, like Jack Nicholson.
Oh yeah, he's our Spike Lee. Like, he'll tell you to all the other players to fuck off, and he'll wait. When the Greek Freak got fouled out, he was like waving in his face. I like all that stuff though. I think it's awesome, and I think all the Raptors would love it too.
Yeah.
Like, he's not really on the Raptors' ass when they play bad. He's just a supportive guy, and he's on the other team when they do anything even mildly wrong.
I was getting a kick out of his bravado, as if he had just personally dunked on the team.
But isn't that fandom? He's sort of
feeling like how we all feel.
He
like
embodies
Jack,
fandom.
Yeah.
He's the avatar for us all, Max.
Would you do that to the level that he does? Would anybody we know go?
I do it at home, and he's doing it on the court.
Okay.
It's awesome.
I wouldn't be confrontational with the other players he does.
He is very confrontational.
Yeah, like what Shane's talking about. Like, I wouldn't do that, only because as like a many times burned Raptors fan, I'm always terrified that I'm going to be the person that triggers Giannis to go off and kill us.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like, I won't go at other players like that, but I would be so demonstrative in celebrating any great Raptors moment. Listen, like I tend to agree. Like, I think Drake is amazing for the team, and I think that the people that bitch about him are either like the people of Milwaukee who are pissed off that the series is tied when they were printing up championship T-shirts, or older like beat reporters that are just like, what is with this new generation?
Yeah.
And, Drake's fine, but this is just respect the game, and it's like, it's
No, yeah, I think
that's
it's fun. I think
antiquated
it adds to it does add a whole new dynamic at the Raptors game,
Yeah.
which is kind of fun. It's like this extra level of entertainment.
Here's a question: do you think the players ever get annoyed that the spotlight is on Drake more so than them, even though they're doing the work?
Maybe.
I think that can be a thing, because Drake. Here's the thing: this is what you get with Drake. He's the most famous person on the court in the game last night. Yeah. That's a fact. Yeah. And instead of being the most famous person on the court and just kind of like enjoying the game, he also then takes a lot of the spotlight. So it becomes about Drake. Like, all I'm seeing, today are these like memes and hilarious jokes about Drake. And it's like, if you're the players, if you're Kawhi Leonard, you're like, man, I'm having a playoff run for the ages. I don't think he gives a shit. I really don't think Kawhi gives a shit. And it's like, in 2 weeks or whenever this magical run ends for us, no one's going to be talking about Drake anyway. They're only going to remember Kawhi and the shots and how the season went. But sometimes in the moment, it's very fascinating to me. I wonder if the players are like, well, wait a second, I'm the one that hit the shot, but now everyone's just talking about Drake.
Yeah, and I also kind of wonder sometimes, like, he famously had that beef with Meek Mill, but Kyle Lowry's from Philadelphia and friends with Meek Mill. Like, if that was awkward.
Kyle's answered that before. Like,
Oh, yeah,
how he
we've
basically
talked
had
about
to, like,
this.
yeah, exactly. Well, Meek tried to come up for game, what was it? Game 1 of the last round because it was Philly against Toronto. Did you hear this story?
No.
So basically,
But they're friends now. Meek and
the
Drake are
beef
good.
has ended. So what happened was Meek Mill, this is a huge story leading in, I believe it was game 1. So Meek is basically the Drake of the Philadelphia 76ers. He goes to a bunch of the games. He sits courtside, whatever. So he's friends with the ownership. So the ownership loved Meek Mill. But Meek Mill obviously has had a lot of trouble with the law and like owning, he was busted with guns and stuff like that. So he's on probation. In order for Meek Mill to leave the country at all, he needs permission from a specific judge. But this judge, she's the one that hit him with like this super harsh sentence. Remember all the free Meek
Of course.
shirts and all that stuff? So whenever he leaves, he needs permission from her. So what happened was the Philly ownership wanted Meek in the building. So it'd be like Meek and Drake in Toronto for game 1, both in their sort of like representing their respective teams. So they basically, they applied, like they sent the consent form. The probation officer approved the trip to Toronto for game 1. Then they sent it to the judge who has to sign anything when he leaves the country. She like actively ignored it all Friday day.
What?
To basically fuck him over. Philly ownership gets involved and they're like trying to push it through. They send their own lawyers there to get this affidavit in front of her,
Wow, I
whatever you
didn't
call
know
this
that.
document. She literally ghosts them. So she's like, yeah, no, I'm not inclined to sign this for Meek at 4:00 on a Friday so we can go to this game. I think it was a Saturday game. So then Drake tweets on his Instagram storied. He's like, this ain't right. We got to get Meek up into Toronto. Philly's ownership wrote like an open letter to the judge about how she was like derelict of duty and how she basically was making it about herself. And so anyway, Meek didn't get to come up for any of the Raptors games.
Yeah.
That being said, Gucci Mane made it out.
That's right.
For game.
And then
game
I
3.
think Drake was sort of chirping Gucci, right?
Yeah, well, they came to the game together, and then because the Raps won Game 3, they were hanging out after, and I think Gucci gave Drake he was wearing a Giannis jersey, and anyway, man, this is all really fun stuff.
It's fun.
I love it. It's a great time to be in the city, and my God, it's just really really fun.
Do you think Nick Nurse enjoyed the massage?
It wasn't long enough to be satisfying.
No, I don't mean in that way. Do you think he was like, oh, I like the fact that Drake's kind of touching me here and supporting the team, or is he like kind of like when a male coworker goes up to a female coworker and rubs her and she has to cringe and pretend she likes it to avoid an awkward moment?
I've thought about this.
It's a Me Too situation, but with Nick Nurse and Drake.
It can happen. It's happened to me at work
It can
where
happen.
someone will like
Drake
touch
massaged
me
you?
and it's just a guy who's touching me and I'm like, oh, I can't say anything or it's weird, but I don't like this.
Fair enough.
Sorry about that. You look a little tense. So 2 things. I thought about this, about Nick Nurse, because Nick Nurse is a little bit of I think he's kind of like in the spotlight. He's coaching in the conference finals. He's a first-year head coach. He's sort of enjoying it. So, like, do I think, like, when Nick had the face that went viral with the mouth agape, I think he enjoyed that he went viral. He's going to know that this image is going to show up everywhere. But here's what I kept thinking. No matter how you break it down, and maybe Drake did this because he does feel like he's got some sort of relationship with Nick Nurse, I do think it's mildly disrespectful. Could you imagine Drake ever doing that to Phil Jackson or even Dwayne Casey?
No.
Right?
Maybe Dwayne Casey.
No, I don't think
way.
so.
Dwayne's more like
He's a respect-
dad,
like-
But Dwayne's an old school dude. Yeah, right.
And you know what I mean? And so it's like, and Nurse is kind of a more sort of like loose, new school, like, we're going to do.
He likes guitar solos.
Exactly.
He likes jamming.
He doesn't sort of have the gravitas of these other guys. But it made me wonder, like, if you're Nick, it's like, like it's weird that Drake felt like he could do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Imagine he just kept upping the ante every game, like towels, wipes, and
Snapping him in the
butt
butt.
Yeah, I can't tell like how much Nick Nurse likes the spotlight, or if he's just happens to be naturally a quirky guy.
Yeah.
Because the things that he does and the way he chooses to dress, and like he knows every time they get off the plane, there's a photographer there documenting it, and he's got his own Nick Nurse hat on.
Yeah.
He's wearing a leather pouch. He's got his guitar on his back.
Can anyone buy those Nick Nurse hats, or is that just something he had made? Like his wife made them for
Nike
Father's
made
Day.
him 4 custom hats. I got to the bottom
So
of it.
I can't buy one.
Well, wait. If they win the championship, I'm sure you'll be able to buy a bunch.
Okay, because I was like, yeah,
That's the deal there. Because I thought he was getting his own merch made, and I was like, you need to be thinking more about pick and roll coverages than your fucking logo, bro. But it turned out
It's
nice.
just 2 ends, though. It's not like a lot of thot went into it.
You don't know how good of a designer he is. That might have taken him 3 weeks to design.
when the Raptors were down.
Honey, is this the right font? Shouldn't you be thinking about how to stop Giannis? Anyway.
When the Raptors were down 2-0. My favorite moment was you freaking out in our Watch Me Nene group about an observation one of the beat reporters made that Nick Nurse was, in your words, yucking it up with the reporters after a practice, but they had a film session to go to. And Kawhi was like, yo, can we get this thing going?
Kawhi was waiting at the side of the scrum, and it actually went longer, and Kawhi wanted to get to work. And Nick is literally having a laugh.
Yeah, and you were like, this is unacceptable. Like, you were so furious because it was like, Kawhi's going to leave. Nick Nurse doesn't take his job seriously. Everything's falling apart.
I was like, you have to appear to be working harder than the players, you know? Instead of worrying about your custom hats and getting off the plane like you're touring with the Eagles with your fucking guitar on your back. Anyway, but again, I'm not a reasonable person during the playoffs. I admit this. My ebbs and flows are insane. Like, I'm a pretty even-keeled person in some ways, but then when it comes to the Raptors, the swings are fast and furious.
You must have had a great sleep last night.
Oh my God, like a baby. Well, I wanted to go to sleep because I was very tired. We've been doing stuff like 4 days a week. We went to the Strokes on Monday.
Yeah.
So I was very tired, but I was so jacked. I just wanted to keep reading Twitter and getting the dopamine hits of like people being like, "This is a series now," and these Raptors showed heart and spirit, and I'm like, "Goddamn right!" It's great.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the Raptors game.
Okay, so moving on. Do we have topics? Should we?
I mean, the only other thing
What do you want to do?
is the Quentin Tarantino movie. Just I'm kind of fascinated with that guy.
Did everybody watch the trailer?
Of course.
Erica, did you watch the trailer? Oh, she's nodding furious like, no.
Do you know who Quentin Tarantino is?
I've heard his name.
Oh,
I
I
don't
was
know
getting
what
to this.
Do you know? Wait.
Shane's jaw has just hit the floor.
Wait. Do you know the movie Pulp Fiction?
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
He directed that movie.
Good movie. I don't get it. I have no idea what that movie's about, even though I saw it.
Do
But
you know Kill Bill?
I know it exists. I've never seen it.
What's the most recent
Django
Tarantino
Unchained?
movies?
Do you know that one?
Oh, with Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a portion of it. My roommates were watching it. I was in and out of the
Glorious
room.
Bastards?
Never seen it.
What's his
Reservoir
latest
Dogs?
No.
Oh my God. This is insane to me. Is this not mind blowing to you guys?
Yeah.
No.
No?
I'm not a movie guy.
Well,
Sorry.
Max
No.
and her aren't like cinephiles in the way that we are.
No, but also she's younger. All these movies like
Pulp Fiction's the one, the canon. That's like that'll be on like the whatever Film Institute's top 100 American movies of all time. She's seen that one.
Yeah.
But you said you don't get it.
No, I Googled it like for like a week after, and I was like, what does it mean? What was the
Oh.
symbol?
Yeah, I wouldn't
But-
overthink it.
That's what everyone tells me. But then
Yeah.
I'm like, is that all it is?
I don't think anyone really knows. Like, if you're talking about what's in the case, whether it's the soul or actual gold bars, I think that's like an afterthought that's fun to think about. But
so you're a big Tarantino fan?
I would think everyone is.
No. I obviously like him, but I don't like love him. But I'm interested in him, like because he in him. Does that make sense? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, you're interested in him. You find you're fascinated by him as
Yeah.
a tour.
Okay. Yeah. Exactly. Because he doesn't. Isn't he saying that he's only going to make 10 movies? And
That's what he's saying.
I know, but I like that. I like the fact that he is like presenting himself as like I was like put on this earth to make 10 incredible movies. Like that's kind of the way he's saying
he's
it.
a great marketer.
Yeah.
He found a way to make himself famous very early on, and a lot of directors aren't famous the way that he is famous.
Well, he has a style that's very distinct. Like, there's probably like 5 directors in the world who have a style that's that cool.
Yeah, and also he writes all of his own scripts, and not every director does that, right? So he's
No,
like,
very few do.
Very few do. Also, just the way, yeah, as to Mike's point, the way he's able to seemingly kind of capture the imagination of not only movie watchers but like actors, like A-list people. He gets them in the movies, like and the cast for the latest movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is insane. Like I feel like who else could pull off that kind of casting?
Well, because he makes art films that are also blockbusters. So it's a pretty crazy marriage. And the whole lie that he's saying he's only going to make 10 films is to make every A-list actor feel like, fuck, if I don't play any role here, I'm going to miss my chance to work with one of the greatest directors of all time.
Well, there's the famous story, and I don't know how true this is, but I read that essentially Leonardo DiCaprio was supposed to do the Christoph Waltz role in Inglourious Bastards. So the Nazi, like the lead Nazi. And so they were talking about it, and Leo eventually passes. Because it's like, it's like, do I want to do a Tarantino film? I don't really totally know. He's an idiosyncratic, weird guy, but do I trust him, blah, blah, blah. And Leo's very picky about his movies. So then he cast Christoph Waltz. Christoph Waltz, I believe, won the Oscar.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And then so Leo apparently reached out to Tarantino, and he goes, I fucked up. Whatever you have in the next one, I want it. That's how he got into Django. So then he was the slave owner in Django Unchained.
Didn't win an Oscar.
Did not win an Oscar. He ended up winning for The Revenant, obviously, a couple years later.
Did
Leo? Yeah, Leo did. That was his.
Oh, that he finally got it.
He finally got
forgot.
it. He's won his Oscar, Max. But anyway, so now Leo, it's like once you're in the Tarantino, like Uma did this with like Kill Bill, well, obviously Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill, and she kind of, when you watch the junkets, it's almost like she doesn't even really like Tarantino, but she's like, the work is so good and iconic that you sort of do it. Do you know what I mean? But I'm fascinated that he's a celebrity. And you don't have a lot of like, what celebrity directors are there? Steven Spielberg, obviously, he's an all-timer. Yeah. But it's like Tarantino's the sort of guy that's like, I think he likes being famous just as much as he likes creating these sort of very specific films that he makes. Like, he's an artist, but I think he also likes being famous, kind of like.
Well, he's such a character, and he has such a way with words and talking about film and getting people excited about film. Like, I'll go down a YouTube rabbit hole just listening to him reviewing other films that aren't even his own, because he makes you understand what makes a great film great.
And all of his reference points in his own movies are like from some
callbacks,
classic, like a callback from like a Japanese film from.
Well, if you look up Kill Bill, it has like 50 film references that he's plucked right from them and put in Kill Bill,
meticulously set
and
up.
There's a wicked edit that compares them both, and he does that with almost every film, and it's amazing.
It is palpable, like his fandom for the medium itself, and like it reminds me of like. Like when Dave Grohl comes around, he's like, "Oh, you got to hear this Stooges record from '73, or you got to listen to it."
Yeah.
You can just tell Dave Grohl is the biggest music fan. He like Tarantino's totally the same way. And actually, the label's house in LA is right around the corner, literally like a 30-second walk to the New Beverly Cinema, which is an old school movie theater that Tarantino bought and owns and curates all the movies. So you can go there and see old school movies that Tarantino picks himself.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So are we excited for this film?
Well, I mean,
Brad and Leo together on screen.
Well, so the movie premiered at Cannes,
yeah,
and
sitting at 90% on Rotten Tomatoes right now.
Yeah, and the Guardian gave it 5 out of 5. So I'm excited. Like I was already excited about the movie because it's like old school Hollywood and the cast is wicked. But knowing that all the critics love it, pretty stoked.
The only Tarantino film I haven't seen is The Hateful Eight. I just never got around to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's not his best, but every one of his films is amazing.
Yeah.
Did you know I was on a TV show with Tarantino?
No.
Fact.
I entered a contest through MTV where it was like it was to promote Inglourious Basterds, but basically you had to recreate a famous scene that Tarantino did, and I chose Pulp Fiction. So I got my 70-year-old friend Bert to play Samuel L. Jackson. And they ended up having me on the show and bringing my 70-year-old friend Bert, dressing him up as Samuel L. Jackson with it wasn't blackface, but we put a little bit of tanner on him and had him in a black afro, and then they had him in the crowd saying funny lines that Samuel L. Jackson would say to Tarantino, and we had a dressing room beside Quentin Tarantino.
Wow,
it was amazing. Erica probably doesn't care, but this was very cool for me.
Oh, that sounds cool.
She's a bigger Burt fan than Tarantino. Yeah. How was Tarantino? Did you interact with him like in the dressing rooms or backstage?
I think we kind of said hello, but I was freaking out. I was so nervous because he had his name on the door and we had our name on the door, and we're right beside him. And it was just cool to be in his presence. And then we were in the audience, and they kept talking to us in the audience. And Tarantino actually watched this thing I made about his work. So it's pretty cool. It's called Pulp Fiction-y if anyone wants to check it out online.
Pulp Fiction-y?
Pulp Fiction-y with a Y at the end. And
cool.
Our friend Sean Dawson's
on
in
YouTube?
it. And Bert. Yes, it's on YouTube.com.
Is that his real name?
Sean Dawson? Yeah. No, Quentin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a sick name.
What number of movie is this for him?
I think
Out of
8 or
10.
9.
Damn.
Well, it's hard to because Kill Bill was in 2 parts. Sometimes he directed a part of 4 Rooms, which you may or may not count. And then there's the that Grindhouse film that he sometimes counts, sometimes doesn't. So it's like his 8th or his 9th, depending
He's
on
just
how
a
you
great
look at
marketer, and you've eaten it up.
Oh, 100%.
And his first film's called The Birthday, but he's never released it really. Or the lore is it caught fire and it can never be watched.
Oh,
yet.
that's awesome.
Some people claim to have a copy of it.
It's like every time like Jay-Z goes on tour, it's the last tour. You know, it's just.
Or when
this is movies,
Kanye
guys.
and 50 Cent said they were going to retire, whichever one didn't get the most album sales or any rap beef. It's all bullshit, but still, it's very
Headlines,
cool.
baby. Okay, so today on the show, our guest is K.Flay.
Christine.
You guys were
Flaherty.
weren't you guys hanging out in LA or you were showing Chicago or something before we did this? Because we hung out with her like a year ago or 2 years ago, and it was actually a really fun hang, sort of more so than just like an artist that comes on. We really sort of connected. Me, you, and Mike D all hung out after a pod we did.
Yeah, that's right. I think we saw her in Cleveland or something last summer. Maybe one other time.
Yeah.
But she's beloved. Like, she just has a presence about herself that people are just drawn to. And she's really, really nice and kind and interested in what other people are doing. She doesn't make the whole thing about herself, like a lot of lead singers tend to do.
You looking in the mirror right now?
Yeah. And just like a wicked hang. And she has friends in high places. Like she was on the new Tom Morello record, I believe. She's also sings on the Linkin Park dude. What's it?
Chester?
Mike.
the other one.
Mike Shinoda.
Guest on the show. Former podcast.
And she's signed to Dan Reynolds' label, and Dan Reynolds is the singer of Imagine Dragons. Anyway, like, I can't say enough good things about her. Like, it's not tiring hanging out with her. You know, some people like who you even like, who you don't see very often. You're like, oh, okay, maybe go put in some time, say hello. It's not like that with her at all. She's wicked.
Yeah, she has Bad Vibes is the first single off this new record. The new record's called Solutions. Her single This Baby Don't Cry is out now. We actually went and saw her. We did this interview at the Drake Hotel where she did sort of like this really intimate, like sold out rammed show. You got up, you did
Relentless.
Yeah, you did Relentless by Arkells.
Yeah, she learned the song. I got to sing it. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was good. And then we actually, our buddy, former guest Blake Murphy, speaking of the Raptors, was out with us that night.
Yeah.
He came to the show, and then we all hung out and drank after. It was kind of like whole like group of dudes hanging out in a booth, and then Christine came up afterward. And
she kind of held court. It was awesome.
She just kind of like had her glass of wine, like move over, boys, and like sat down, and basically we just all like chatted and like talked about everything. We were talking about Stanford. We were talking about hoops at certain points. Like we kind of covered a lot.
She
of
went to
spectrum.
Stanford?
Yeah, she's smart.
Oh.
Yeah. You obviously didn't listen to the first pod she was on because we went deep on that.
Well, she was nominated for the I Sang for Lupus Challenge and did not do it, so she was dead to me for a bit.
That's fair. That's fair. So this was a longer conversation, Maxie. We got right into it with her. I think we went for like a good 40 minutes or something.
Damn.
Like that.
All right, let's get to it.
Settle in. Yeah. You guys want to get to K.Flay?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
You can roll.
We are now rolling. So all
Okay.
of the other stuff that's set off
Well,
mic will never
I
be
will say
recorded.
this was off camera. Off camera. Wow. Wow. Diva bitch. Okay. Off mic, I was saying that I subscribe to the podcast.
Oh,
I'm a regular listener.
That is
my goodness.
We're honored. Thank you.
Very honored.
And you have a good taste in podcasts too.
And you were the very first, and thus far maybe the only guest that you were going to come on as a guest. This is 2 years ago. I was actually just listening back to the episode. It was April 2017.
Oh,
Yes.
that's right.
And you weren't only sort of a feature guest, although you were, but you sat for the whole hour, basically.
We just hung out,
hung
and I
out.
remember because you were, you guys were in the studio.
We were in the studio working on knocking at the
right,
door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was a
Because-
secret.
Yeah, no one was supposed to know.
Right, and we were talking about like Budweiser
Yeah, and like the commercial
and like
everything.
baseball.
Yeah.
And actually, incidentally, I was walking the streets of Toronto last night looking for vegetables
Okay.
Okay.
because like the tour struggle
Yeah,
is
sure.
just
To
like, man,
stay healthy?
vegetables.
Yeah.
And it's not even like I need like healthy food per se. It's just that I need vegetables.
Yeah.
Specifically. Because everything else is kind of in abundance. Vegetables are more rare. And so I was like in hot pursuit of a place where I could just get like
fresh vegetables?
like fresh
raw
veggies.
vegetables.
Not at a grocery store, but like a place.
Okay.
And I went out onto the streets and the Blue Jays game had just let out. And so it was just like the streets were swarmed with Blue Jays fans. And I was like, I was like swimming upstream. I was like salmon swimming upstream. Anyway.
Did you find them?
Yeah. Don't leave us hanging.
I went to a place. I hope like no one's gonna. Yeah, like I hope I made an okay decision.
Okay.
I went to a place called IQ.
Oh yeah, that's sort of a health food.
It's like a
place.
health food
yeah,
place.
Yeah.
So I found, needless to say, I found
I think
vegetables.
I've been to that one. Where's that again?
It was on Bay Street
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like-
down in the financial district, there's some
down there.
healthy spots there.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
a very nice. I think he was Irish man.
Oh, wow.
Gave me
Some vegetables. Not just
I've now
potatoes.
have I said the word vegetables more in the
This
last
is so rock
minute?
and roll.
It might be the most.
I like this tour story. Is like back in the day, like I was roaming the streets looking for a hit, looking for some heroin.
Now you're just trying to find some cauliflower.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like when you're like, do you know IQ? And I nodded like as if I knew the health place, but I'm more of a Snickers man. I get my groceries at a convenience store.
I've never had a Snickers.
What?
Get out.
Why?
True story. I'm gonna wait till. When does this air?
That's a great question.
Like not like after Monday, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna wait till that's when we're announcing the record.
I know because I was like, how much can we talk about the record?
We
But
can-
you'll announce it on Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
Good, okay.
when the record comes out, or like I think in celebration of it, I'm gonna have my first Snickers.
What has kept you from eating a Snickers bar this whole time?
Well, my
Well, it all started in
Thought about this a lot.
1991.
well, so I have two dads. I have my biological dad, and then my adopted dad, who in large part raised me. So dad two, Tom. They're both named Tom. So confusing. So, second dad is deathly allergic to nuts. So we had no nuts in the house.
Keep them out of the house. Yeah.
And therefore, I just never had candy with nuts,
Sure,
peanut butter, anything like that. And so I didn't have the taste for it. And as an adult, when you eat less candy, generally, I think, no offense to
Max and I are being silent here because
Yeah, we have
Max,
the sweet tooth.
Max tweeted the other day, my favorite restaurant is Bulk Barn. Do you guys have Bulk Barn in the States?
Bulk Barn.
Oh, maybe Bulk
that's
Barn.
maybe that's a Canadian thing.
It's like
Sorry.
it's basically any kind of candy or nut, and you get it in a bin. I'm
It's
trying to
in
think
this
what
giant warehouse. Like if you want Snickers, you get a giant bin of Snickers and you just scoop them and throw them in a bag.
Wow.
And they do it
Yeah.
by weight.
It's basically like that part of the Whole Foods section.
Yeah.
where
I
you
know
can-
what you're talking
But
about.
yes, as you get
Unwrapped.
older, you get healthier
Right.
generally.
So ostensibly, you eat fewer candy bars, and because of that, when I do choose candy, I just go back to my old classics, which is like Twix, Midnight Milky Way, just because that's in my lexicon. Snickers is out of it, and I only recently kind of developed more of a taste for like those Justin's peanut butter cups.
I think that's an American thing, the Justins.
Wow.
We
Okay.
just- Reese's
Well,
is the thing here.
and also you guys don't have Trader Joe's, right?
No.
Okay, God, this is a horrible situation. So the best ones are, and actually I listened to a podcast, there's a Good Planet Money series about this dude in Vancouver who was like going down, doing these recon missions in
I've heard this.
Washington
Yeah.
to buy stuff from Trader Joe's, and then he opened like a fake Trader Joe's in Vancouver.
Yeah. Like a
Oh.
knockoff Trader
Yeah,
Joe's.
exactly.
What did he call it? I hope it's something clever.
I can't remember, but it got shut down. It was like a thing, and
Ah.
all the Trader Joe's in Washington had like an APB on this guy. Like,
'cause
if
he was
you
coming
see
in
this
and-
man, yeah.
Man.
Like he was
Isn't that-
smuggling
That's pretty
narcotics.
enterprising of him, though.
Extremely
Getting the people what they want.
And then you'd think, why wouldn't Trader Joe's just open up a store? Look at this demand.
I
Yeah,
know.
there is a thing in Canada where people get very excited to try like an American thing. So I remember when Krispy Kremes first showed up.
Oh, yeah.
In Mississauga, which is just outside of Toronto, is the first location, and literally cars around the block. People were
Yep.
going nuts, and I don't think those donuts are particularly good. Also,
When they're fresh, they're pretty good. Come on.
really?
Yeah.
Maybe I just
you're
don't
trying
like
to be like a loyal Tim
No,
Hortons
I just
guy,
don't.
but-
No, I don't care that much about Tim Hortons donuts either. I don't think I like donuts that much, which is weird given that I have a sweet tooth.
Yeah.
What else was another one? Like American Eagle also didn't arrive until like the late '90s.
I might have missed the hubbub over that.
Yeah.
Were
Yeah.
you there at opening day when they cut the ribbon?
No, but I do remember people going
need
to the
my
States.
polo shirt
No,
now.
people going to Buffalo to be like, "Yo, there's an American Eagle outlet down there."
Okay.
I was more of a
Target.
Rockaware guy myself.
Rockaware.
Rocco.
Yeah, there's some photos from grade 9.
Wow, young Max.
I love my Jay-Z, man. Yeah.
Well, who doesn't?
Who doesn't? Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So
But
how have you been? Maybe we
yeah.
should get into this interview.
Yeah, yeah.
Although it's kind of nice when we just talk. I mean,
It is nice to just
and
talk.
you're a podcast fan, like you said, not of ours, although you subscribe and thank you
Yes.
for that. But in
course.
general, what is your favorite podcast right now?
what are you into?
Well, I feel like I've been in a little bit of a podcast desert recently.
Oh.
Just because, so I really, really, and I was mentioning this to you, I loved season 3 of Heavyweight. I love Heavyweight.
Yeah.
I think it's like, I mean,
Jonathan Goldstein, a Canadian.
Jonathan Goldstein is a Canadian. He's from
Yeah.
Montreal.
Yeah. Good neurotic Jewish guy.
Let our listeners know what's the sort of theme of the podcast.
So the premise of the podcast is Jonathan has a guest, and with that guest, he tries to help them resolve an issue from the past.
Tie up loose ends.
Tie up loose the weight that is holding them down, pulling them towards the epicenter of guilt and shame. He tries to help them deal with that. And the second season, this is an honest opinion, I thought was a little bit mediocre, but I have very high standards. First and third seasons are very good, and actually I highly recommend, I think it's episode 2 of season 3, the Rob Corddry episode.
okay.
Is
It
it about
is-
him breaking his arm?
It's about him breaking his
Yeah,
arm.
he has a memory of breaking his arm, but his family doesn't think it happened. like
Wow.
as a child.
And he's like, because his daughter basically breaks her arm, and he's like, oh, I also broke my arm. And then his family is like, you didn't break your arm. And he's like, wait, but I did. And his family and his sister is like the memory keeper of the family. And she's like, no, you didn't. So basically Jonathan goes and they try to figure out. And then Rob's like, wait, did I break my arm? I don't want to give.
question his own memories then.
The episode that was recommended to me by Christine is probably the most famous one. Is about Moby, the recording artist.
Yeah, you described this one to me.
Yes, yeah. I told Christine, I was like, I've
did.
told this story about Moby and a long lost friend, like at a number of like parties, basically.
Who had given him music that inspired him, and then he sort of had this career based on this friend's
and his friend
recommendation.
wanted his
To be
CD
acknowledged.
album. Yeah, to be acknowledged, basically.
Yeah.
But not a cut of the cheddar.
No, he didn't want money. He just wanted
He wanted his CDs back and a little bit of credit.
a little bit of credit.
Yeah, just let the people know that there'd be no Moby without my influence.
That's right.
Right.
What's okay? So
I
heavyweight.
love heavyweight.
Yeah.
I
That-
also what was I listening to? I was also listening to the new season of The Uncertain Hour, which came up about welfare, but the new season is about the opioid crisis in the U.S. But they started off by describing the crack epidemic, because that was the last big drug epidemic in the States. And it's quite interesting because it was made, there's like a really famous address that George H.W. Bush, dad of George W. Bush, gave to the nation right after he was elected, in which he held up a little baggie of crack in the White House.
Yep.
Wow.
In the Oval Office, like straight up, and the cameras on the American people, and he's addressing the American people, and he's like, this bag of crack was bought across the street from
But
the
they
White
set
House.
the guy up.
Of course.
I know this story. I read
You
the
know this.
feature on this. This is a fascinating story.
It's a super fascinating story, and that's the starting point for this podcast series,
And it's called Uncertain Hour.
The Uncertain Hour. Yeah. And every season they talk about, like something that everybody has an opinion on, but nobody knows anything about, is kind of the guise of it. Anyway, so I just finished listening to that. There's a new one called To Live and Die in L.A., which is kind of true crime, and I don't know why I'm listening to it.
Are you living in LA now?
I do live in L.A.
Interesting.
Maybe
How long,
that's why.
How long have you been there? Were you there when we hung out last?
I was there when we hung out last, but I was in my peripatetic, like,
What's that word mean?
traveling,
Oh, okay, yeah.
never in one place
Yep.
state.
Uh-huh. So you've settled in a little bit.
I've settled in a little bit.
Well, I want to ask about your press release, because as an artist or a band guy myself, we have to think about the press release, because it's as silly as it is in my mind. It's
like
very
as an exercise.
Uh,
you mean,
well,
or
just
as
'cause it's
a
like-
thing you have to do.
It's a
in
thing
weird
you
way.
have to do, because ultimately the narrative of the record is going to be shaped by this one document in a lot
True.
of ways.
Yes.
I mean, I think now you have a little bit more control over it, because journalists will just like check out what you're saying on your Twitter and Instagram, and they'll reference that. But they also will look at this press release and say, okay, it was recorded here, and it was in a state of depression, or they wanted to work with a new producer, whatever the narrative is. How much input did you have in yours? Because you talk a little bit about you coming home from tour and having a bit of a tough time at home. Like, did you help? Who wrote your press release? I want to know.
My publicist wrote my press release.
Did you edit it?
It was actually just sent to me.
Oh, we got it.
So, yeah.
Any edits?
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. So
It-
when you say it was just sent to you, you mean like within the last couple hours?
last night, like Seth, my manager, just sent me an update like a couple hours ago.
Because we got one 2 days ago.
So I think that there's like a preliminary one that's
Okay.
being sent out for early. So what's happening also is, because I'm in Canada,
Yeah.
we're doing like early press.
Sure.
Yeah, this is an early phase of your cycle. Because
Right.
your album, like you said, it's not coming out until July, I
Correct.
believe. And so like we can't even, if this wasn't going to be out till next week, even say the name of the album.
Exactly.
We're still in very early stages. So maybe we got a prototype of the press
You
release.
got a prototype of the press release, but it's a good point, because then if you have it, then that's
Who else has it?
That's what you have.
Yeah.
And I think like it is interesting the documents and the versions of things in like the digital age that are just out there. Like I think about that with songs too, where I'm like, I've sent versions of songs
Oh yeah.
to like lots
In
of
various
people.
like stages of completion that just
Totally. And to like my parents, and no offense, it's like if someone was going to accidentally like leak it or something, my mom would be that person. She's
I
listening to
tweeted it. I'm so sorry,
check out her
honey.
new song. It's so good.
yeah, and like, Mom, I love you. I don't, you understand that, but it's, yeah. So I think it is kind of freaky, but anyway, sorry. I feel like you were leading into.
Oh no!
something.
Well, the reason why the press release exercise is interesting to me is that it's not that I'm particularly precious about the document itself. It's more just that for the next 6 months, as you do every interview, the person's going to be referencing it, so you just want it to be good. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Well,
like
yeah.
that's why there's certain things that you don't have to spend that much time on, because you're like, okay, it'll come and go, and it's not going to affect my life that much.
You'll be locked into talking points based on what's said in this press release for the next 6 months.
Yeah. And so you have to be really crafty because you're gonna have to think about like, is this something I'm gonna want to talk about in 6 months when I'm like in Germany doing press?
That's a very good point. The most of the premise of the press release was through a really long conversation that I had with a journalist.
Yeah.
Who was just basically like asking me stuff about the record. Like not dissimilar to how we're speaking right now.
Was the exercise though for the press release?
Correct.
Okay,
was
gotcha.
for like bio, press release, that kind
And
of
that's
stuff.
the thing. A lot of like great music journalists do this on the side, and they won't be referenced in the press release itself. But in our experience, we'll go to like one of our favorite music journalists who we just know is a good writer and a good person at like distilling an artist, and then they'll be able to craft the document itself.
Totally. So
Yeah.
that's vaguely the process for this, but I haven't edited it yet.
Okay. Yeah.
So-
Yeah, and you have that right to if you want to.
Yes.
How
Okay.
hands are you when it comes to sort of your career and I guess the business of music? Are you sort of, I am the boss, I'm the CEO, I need to touch every aspect of it? Or are you like, I empower people and once I trust those people to do their job, I step back?
Well, I'm trying to do more of the latter
Yeah.
because I think it's a better way in general. I think when people feel empowered and like they have real responsibility and ownership, I think they do a better job and are more excited.
They're more
And
committed to it as well.
Totally.
Because
And
they feel like, oh, this is a thing that I was a part of.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's like, because so many artists start just like doing it all themselves, so you get very controlling and protective. So I feel like on this record, I've done a very good job of letting some of those things go, and I think it's been really productive. That being said, I'm still like overseeing everything, and I also think on the flip side, when people like work for you or work with you, them knowing that you give a shit is very important. Because then what's the point for anybody?
Yeah.
So I do think it's a delicate balance. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel that when in working as part of a team, like how you delegate, how you be a leader, but like
No,
somebody
totally.
else-
It's like in sports. Like good leadership is not just telling people what to do, but it's by your actions. It's like, oh, that guy, like the best player on the team was the first person in the gym and the last guy to leave. Like that says something. So if you're an aloof person, and then you're talking to some illustrator who's putting together your album design, and you're like, this person doesn't seem to care. Like, should I care that much?
Right.
That's
Well,
what they'd be asking themselves.
last night I was up to like 3 doing like edits on the vinyl layout. So I have a dude, Dave, who's awesome. Dave Thomas, so of course I always think Wendy's.
Sure. Yeah.
He's English, but I don't know if they have Wendy's over there. Never. I've actually never thought about that.
They're into Burger King there, I feel like, and McDonald's.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have
Of
I don't think they have Wendy's,
Burger
actually.
King is
Oh, it's a
royal.
a royal thing. Yeah.
They really love Burger King.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was up just doing the edits and making sure, because like at the end of the day, here's what I think what it boils down to is nobody is gonna care as much as you because it's not their career.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have to be the person you have to be the end of the line, and you have to be like at least spiritually the first in and the last out.
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
that's great. Way to
It's
put it.
also a balance too, I think, as you go through it to find out what pieces are valuable to be obsessed about, and then other things that actually don't matter.
Oh, that's
grand-
such a good point.
You know what I mean?
Because there's so many things.
I've died on hills that were not worth dying on, but seemed so important in
Totally.
the past.
It's
and
a
then
great point.
Only with sort of like the benefit of hindsight, I go, oh, that fucking hill didn't matter at all. But at the time, I was like ready to throw it all away because of that hill. Anyway, I think that's something that you learn as you sort of go along through any sort of endeavor.
Yeah.
Are there any things on this rollout that you're like, we're not going to do it like last time? Like, is there a specific thing where like, okay, that
Lessons
promo
learned?
event, not going to do that, or this type of scheduling, we went too hard in any particular area?
Well, yes. So I think, and you kind of alluded to this in terms of where I ended up on the end of the last record cycle, which is like not in the best mental or physical place.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty. We kind of ended things like with 4.5 months of just like straight. I was home like 10 days total.
Oh.
And for some people that is okay, but I think as a front person especially, it just like takes a toll. And I found myself, I was like, I had like lost joy. I like was not, and not that like your job has to be fun all of the time, but I think that when you are a performer and a creative person, like you being engaged with some version of joy is actually your job. And when that doesn't happen and you find yourself like kind of wanting to leave a situation, being like, ugh, like, you know, and losing like the gratitude. And that's kind of where I was at.
And you have a lot of responsibilities. Like you are K.Flay.
Right.
And there are fans that want to meet you after the show and radio. Like it's on you to do that heavy lifting that's not even included in the show itself.
Yeah, and I think like I just feel like I was disengaged and like in a way, like not totally, like I still was engaged, but I just wasn't. Yeah, I like lost the joy.
Yeah, you're missing the spark. When you're in that moment, you know, there's obviously a lot of thoughts that go through your mind. Did you ever think about quitting? Did you ever think, you know what, maybe I'll do something else? Or that doesn't even touch your brain?
That wasn't touching my brain, at least not at this point. And I think part of the reason for that is, so I basically like tour kind of ended. We did another tour in the summer, which actually I have to say was sort of a turning point for me. So I can talk about that. But this big long thing ended, and I went and had a beer with my manager Seth, who's also my very good friend, and he kind of like, I don't want to call it an intervention, but like a friend thing. He was like, hey, you're my friend, and like you don't seem like good right now, and I'm like kind of worried about you. And normally people don't worry about me because I'm pretty.
You got your head on straight.
I got my head on straight.
That's your
and,
reputation,
like,
at least. Yeah.
Keep you know, I keep everything pretty much organized and good. And he was just like, you know, there's time for you to get it together, kind of like mentally, physically. And basically I did. And it was just about sort of like retraining my brain. And even now, like, so I started like going to therapy, just like, and not that anything was so wrong, but it was just like, hey, I'm in this position and I've worked hard to have a job where I get to do this. I should be like feeling engaged and happy. Like this is
I'm living my dream.
It's a dream come true.
Yeah.
And if I don't feel happy in this space and fulfilled and excited, literally what's the point? And I pretty much just started writing music, and it was like so much creative energy and so much positive energy. And like I think the record feels very upbeat and positive, at least for me, and hopeful. And that was like how I started out the process, and I think like has been the spirit of everything. Like I'm in like really good physical shape. I like have my mind pretty good. It's like I'm good.
What even if you didn't think you were going to quit, did you have a time like amount of time in your mind that you're like, okay, I need 6 months off, or and was that?
Did you set parameters?
Was there parameters, and did you break the parameters when you're like, no, I kind of want to get back to work after like a week of being at home or something? Like, how did you think it was going to go when you were walking into that chapter?
I don't know if I even thought about that.
It was like day by day.
I think it was kind of a day by day thing, and you know when. Like Mike, you're kind of talking about the dying on the hill thing.
Yeah.
So we postponed a tour. So I was supposed to be in Europe last fall.
I do remember that actually. And then you can't postponed it.
And it's happening now this fall. But that was kind of, you know, I never like cancel anything or delay anything. Like, you know, our whole attitude, I think it's very similar to yours. It's just like by any means necessary. I'm always down, always show up. Yeah. And it was one of those things where the record was going so well. I was in such a good like mental headspace that we were like, I don't know. I think it's too early to derail that. And furthermore, it would make a lot more sense to come back and play the new record in 8 months or whatever than play like we've already been to Europe and we played all this stuff. So I think there were like practical reasons why it made sense, but that was very gut-wrenching for me, and I felt like a complete failure. I was like, wow, I'm a horrible person. You know, and I was just like, it was hard to put it in perspective.
And that's the thing is there's this thing that like there's this self-imposed sort of like thing that we do to ourselves where you're like, oh, I said I would show up and I didn't show up, but like it was the right thing for you to do to postpone it, right? But then you also then feel all this immense guilt because you're like you said, you identify as somebody that's like, I show up, I hit my marks, and then to not, it's like, well, wait a second, this kind of goes against my own self-image of myself or my idea of who I am as a professional or whatever, and it's like, it's hard to sort of like change or at least accept that when you're sort of going through sort of like something that maybe you've never been through before.
Totally, and I think the other thing too is, and Seth kind of put this in perspective as well, where he was like, what you're gonna give to people when you're in
you come back.
in a place to give it is so much better.
Yeah,
you know,
this is-
that's an experience that people are gonna really value and really benefit from. And by the way, you're gonna be able to as well and be a part of that exchange.
Yeah, this is not like a Morrissey thing where it's like a pattern of behavior of like
No.
canceling tours. Like
No.
people, you built up a lot of goodwill, and people, I think, your fans have a sense of who you are. So if you weren't going to do something, it'd be for a good reason. And yeah, but it's funny because I feel like everybody in their job struggles with it. There's like, oh, if I don't come in today, and occasionally you do piss off your colleagues or whatever. But most of the time they go, oh, Mike wasn't in today. Okay, cool, whatever. Like
They don't really care. They go
and
on
like
with
fans,
their
of course, want to see you. And if Arkells were to cancel something, fans would be bummed. But they go, oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, never done that before. Okay, but whatever. Anyway, I'm sure they'll be back. Like people get on with their day faster than you think.
It's not as heavy to them as it is to you probably in making the choice.
Yeah.
But you touched on something that I thought was really interesting, which is the idea that when you do come back and circle through, you're going to get something back out of it that you wouldn't have if you'd done it initially. And that's something that I think people forget as they go, you're going, oh, what am I giving to the people that are showing up? Like it's almost like a one-way exchange, but then it's like almost like, oh wait, but I started this because I also get something back. Like sort of I can feel it. They reciprocate sort of this feeling that I'm putting out to them. And if you're incapable of feeling that, the idea of going out and doing it maybe loses a little bit of the appeal.
100%. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're doing differently with this record and this time around is the touring schedule is just, there's spaces in between things. Because it's not a matter of like, you know, I really enjoy traveling, playing shows. I'm like suited to the lifestyle. But I think what we realized is, yeah, like there needs to be like a week off after 3 weeks of shows.
Recharge
and-
the battery.
Yeah, and I think like sometimes like I get trapped again in this idea that yeah, you should just be, you know, always able to do whatever, like, and the fact is like you can make your own rules for how to live. Like that's literally everyone's just making it up. So why can't you just make your own rules? Like learn from how you thrive and how you like die and try to adjust accordingly. So we're doing that on this record, which I'm really excited about. And I think the other thing is on the last record, things were like a little bit haphazard because I was already on the road from an EP that like was
It all just kinda
contained
blended
within
together.
the album.
Yeah.
And this is like the record, it looks a certain way. Everything is like purpley,
Yeah.
you know.
There's a continuity to it.
There's
all.
continuity
Yeah.
to it, and it's been nice to be able to do that ahead of time.
And have the time to roll it out.
Exactly.
That's the thing I think every band hopes for is that you're like, okay, we have enough time to make sure that the amp is painted the right color and our wardrobe looks like it should or whatever
Yeah.
your objective is.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's so I'm very much looking forward to it's like I'm almost feeling the same way about shows that I did when I just started
Cool.
and the process, which is a really cool thing to feel like I'm back in that space. And this whole year's been about just like returning to like childlike curiosity and trying to tap into that within myself.
Well, I want to ask about you had 3 producers on the record?
Actually 4,
okay.
but 2 of them only did one song.
Okay, cool. Who is it? Tony Little, right?
Joel Little.
Joel Little, sorry. And he did some of the Lord stuff.
Yes. So Joel produced one song on this record, which is called "Sister."
Oh, okay.
And
yeah, I
Joel
love that
kind
song.
We
of-
just heard that
Yeah.
in the
And you just heard me
soundtrack.
So
sound
good.
check that.
Yeah.
That was a
Thank
great
you.
tune.
Thank you. So Joel is
Is that going to be a follow-up single? Do you think, or
that?
not to lock you into anything?
Yeah,
but-
Mike, don't look me
Sorry,
into
well,
anything. Jeez. Okay, I don't know yet.
Okay, fair answer.
Hi, Greg. Whatever. I can't. Who knows? Joel is Kiwi man.
Yeah, that's
from,
right.
From New Zealand, and yes, he produced the first Lord record, which obviously was gigantic and everything. But has done tons of stuff since, and is truly one of the nicest guys ever. Plus, what was really cool about that song, which is about friendship and sisterhood as a non-gendered concept. He has 2 young daughters.
Oh.
And so they were like, and his studio's in his house. So they were like running around, like in the pool. It was a very good environment.
What would you say his secret sauce is? Because I'm always interested in producers and what makes them special. And
In
sometimes
a definable way, and sometimes it's hard to describe.
Yeah,
it. I
sometimes-
like that you like asking that.
Yeah,
It's
we
like-
talked to Matt Schultz from Cage the Elephant, and he did their last record with
John Hill.
Yeah. And he was like, the thing that's interesting about him is that he's like kind of a quiet guy. He lets things, he's not like domineering in the room. Or do you know John Hill?
I know John.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
very well,
was that
yeah.
an accurate description of him?
Totally.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And obviously, that guy is a genius in his own way. But it's cool to say, okay, he seems to have a bit of a soft touch, and he seems to be a good listener, and that's what makes him special, right? Would you say?
Totally.
So what? So with Joel, what would you say?
I think with Joel, it's actually similar to that. Joel does not have a big personality or an intrusive personality. I think he's a combination of being both a good listener and very decisive. And I think decisiveness is a great trait in a producer. And I found this with Mike Elizondo too on my last record.
yeah.
He's very like, we picked the synth and we recorded it, and that is it. That's what's happening. And they picks the tone before, doesn't change anything in the box. So it's like, that's what it is. And I think that there's something when you're the artist in the room that can be very, very helpful about that. When it's good decisiveness.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Joel's similar, and he has very good feedback on things that are working and don't work, and he's extremely communicative and just reliable and normal.
Yeah.
Which I personally appreciate. Everybody involved in this record, as also a fun fact, every studio environment I worked in was a house.
Oh, cool.
So nothing was recorded in a studio.
So you're going to have certain vibes if you're recording in a house. Like you said, the daughters were in the pool and all that.
Yeah.
I'm always interested. You said that, he was very communicative in things that worked and didn't work. As an artist, how do you receive negative, I don't want to use the word negative feedback, but maybe when something doesn't work, if they say, this isn't quite working, what do you think? Are you someone that goes, well, shit, I'm going to fight for that? Or are you kind of like, I hear what you're saying, I politely disagree? Where do you land on that spectrum?
I might even swing further to the okay, let's throw it out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wasn't always that way, but I think I've found that when somebody in the room's not feeling something, and granted, it has to be someone I trust, so it wouldn't just some random person shows up. But if it's a collaborator and they're really not feeling something, I pretty much will be like, then let's throw it out. Though that being said, there have been a few things I've fought for. But I really tried to be not precious on this record. And even there's a song called This Baby Don't Cry.
Which we just heard.
Which you also just
which
heard.
Is awesome.
Thank you. Which is out now.
Oh, cool.
Or
Okay,
will
came out.
be.
Oh, awesome.
When they hear this,
Yeah.
cool.
When you hear this, it will be out in the
sick.
world.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that song has had a couple different iterations, all done in rapid succession. And there was a time in which it had a singing part.
Because it's more of a rappy
This
thing.
melodic chorus. And Tommy, the producer that I worked on.
Who's that?
Tommy English.
Oh, yeah.
Who I did a lot of my last record with and half of this record. Who's my really good friend. He lives 4 minutes up the road from me. We grew up both in the suburbs of Chicago. He's just and he's truly especially in this recording process, our friendship just got solidified to the next level, which is really, really great. And I'm very, very grateful for. But we were both this rules, this singing part's so cool. Yeah, this is great. And I sent it to Dan Reynolds, who's from Imagine Dragons, who's my label head at Interscope.
We spoke a lot about him and your relationship in
Yes.
our first interview. So go back and listen, listeners, if you want to hear about that.
Go back and listen. So I sent it to him, and he was like, I don't know, I like the other version. And my first instinct was to be like, you're wrong, this version's better. But then I was like, okay. First of all, what Dan doesn't care. This is feedback that's literally just to help. And I listened back, and I was like, Tommy, I think we got to get rid of that part. And he was like, no, dude, that's so good. And then we both came around, got rid of it, and 3 days later we're like, that part, no.
Yeah.
But I think,
Wild.
and there are a couple songs that have had.
Yeah, you need to
Stories
practice
like that.
non-attachment in the studio
Yes.
because it's so easy. And I was trying to work on some songs today, and there's a lyric that I was in my mind. I was like, oh, this needs to be the lyric. This is the lyric in this part of the song, and that needs to stay. And how do I keep it? And how do I make it work? And then I stepped back for a second. I was like, who cares? Who cares about that lyric? Why do I care? Nobody's heard this song. This isn't even a song.
Yeah.
But I've acted like this is some divine inspiration. When none of it is. You know what I mean? So then you have to go, oh, okay, maybe there's another idea. Okay, that could be step back, sit with it for a few days and go, okay, yeah, no, that works too. or
So
whatever.
much of writing, I think, is just being open to the replacement of ideas.
Yeah.
Like even I read often interviews with novelists, and I think a big part, a lot of people do outlines at the beginning of the process, but I think for many successful novelists, it's about revision and about
kill your babies.
yeah, and it's and that's like it's easier with songwriting because the babies are shorter.
They're only
you
3
know?
minutes long,
like,
and there's
like
you
a
know.
book seems. And actually, I was reading. Oh my God! First, I have to recommend this book. I mentioned it earlier. So there's a book called Pachinko
Okay.
by Min Jin Lee. I say this with no self-interest. It is just one of the best books I've read in the last 5 years. So I highly recommend it. But her first novel is called Free Food for Millionaires. And it's also good, but Pachinko is like big time thumbs up. But there's an intro to Free Food for Millionaires that's included because it came out 10 years ago and kind of now is just getting reprinted because Pachinko was such a
popularity,
big
yeah.
hit. And she talks about basically she had written like 300 pages of this first book and scrapped the whole, or like basically like wrote a whole book and just
like, nah.
scrapped it
Yep.
and started over. And I'm like, this is how you get to be like the writer person that you want to be. This is how you get to that spot, is like you have to go through the death of like the lesser idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And non-attachment.
Yeah.
Well, it's also a delicate alchemy because it's like, how do you know which is the better idea? And you just have to trust.
There's
your
no
instincts.
counterfactual out there. Where it's
No,
like, there's
there's no
another universe
analytics.
where it's like, actually, if we went with the other version of Baby Don't Cry,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
You just don't.
That's
know.
very true.
It's all subjective. You know what I mean? And then ultimately, you're the arbiter of your own taste and what you want to put out. So the decision ultimately lies with you. And it's like, I guess you'll never really know. But then once you make the decision and the jello's set, you just got to keep it moving.
Yes. It's so true. But there is, and I think it comes with, I think sometimes people have a preternatural sense of this is right, this is wrong. I didn't have that. I had to develop it over time. I feel like I have it now.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a late bloomer in a lot of ways. But
we-
I have that. I have that like compass north now, I think, where I can take the feedback, be like, you know what, let's scrap it, and then feel that in my heart of hearts it was the right decision.
Yeah.
We were talking on your web series on Instagram Live that you don't write anything really before you get in the studio. Like, so really, you just like book a session with the producer that you ended up recording the songs, cutting the songs with, and then walk us through "Baby Don't Cry."
Well, this Baby Don't Cry is actually
Okay, let's walk
No,
us
but-
through bad
Bad Vibes.
Yeah.
Okay. Bad Vibes is a simpler one.
Go.
So Tommy English, the producer,
Your guy.
at the time was living in Nashville. So this is the one, there are 2 songs on the record that were written prior to the end of my tour.
Sure.
They were written in like a pocket when I had a week off earlier and I went to write. So Tommy was living in Nashville. Again, I had a studio in his house. I came through and he played that at the beginning of the song. Clearly I don't have perfect pitch. That was not an F. I don't know what note that was.
I don't either.
Something wrong. And I was just like, bad vibes.
Ah,
Bad vibes. Which is just an octave. It's not even a melody.
yeah. So it just came out of you. You
Just came out of me.
Yeah.
And really at that point I had no agenda because I hadn't begun the
You weren't even
album. I
thinking about
had
the next record.
no.
Do you go in with like a notebook of lyrics though, or are you writing them in the studio?
No.
She's like Jay-Z, man.
You just
I-
literally show up and then you're like, let's make something.
I show up and I say, let's make something, and I don't have any lyrics. Sometimes I will have listened to something, PCast, I've read something, and an idea from that.
Wait. Did you just refer to a podcast as a PCast?
Yeah, she's been doing that all day.
That's a new one to us. We're
Are you
podcasting.
serious?
Yeah.
I only call them PCast.
Really?
And like, in fact, on the like, people like in serious text chains of our touring group, people will be like, "Oh, Christine's PCasting." Like that means I'm like in my bunk and I'm listening to a podcast.
Yeah, that's great.
This is gonna become the thing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please, that would give me great
Okay.
joy.
All right.
Welcome to the PCast.
All right. So you've just listened to a PCast and you're going into the
So
studio.
yeah, and then like if there was something, that came up or an idea or a feeling, I might be like, "Hey, I just listened to this. Maybe we could like vibe on that." But it never ends up being that. That always just ends up being kind of a spiritual beginning place.
Sure.
And then it's always like there's some melodic information, and then we start. Now there have been exceptions to this rule where I've written things by myself or like little riffs, like the first song on the album, which is called I Like Myself.
Yeah, that's
I
great
did
too.
a version of on guitar and sent to JT, who's the producer on that and my collaborator and has also played in my band for many years and is amazing and I love him. And I was like, but I don't want to do it with like guitars, like this is wrong. We should do it with synths. It should feel like dance song. And then I went to Nashville and we did it. But so sometimes there's like an idea I have just at home.
Yeah.
So Bad Vibes. Get back to Bad Vibes.
So Bad Vibes, yeah. So I go, Bad Vibes. And I was like, man, you know, I've been hanging out with all these people lately and they're like cynical as a position, you know, not in reaction to anything and not because it's merited.
It's just kind of their starting place.
Yeah.
Coming in this way.
Right. Home plate is like cynicism.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm thinking like, especially at this point, like Trump's newly elected, there's just the cloud of darkness over everything. And it just feels like, I mean, I guess it always feels like there's bad things, but you know, just with everything, I'm like, the last thing we need is just pointless cynicism that's not benefiting anyone. It's just sort of it's like a posturing. And I really don't like posturing. And I find earnest, genuine people to be the people I like. And Tommy's very similar. So I just started listing all these things that like I've seen on people or people have done it just makes me feel bad. You know, like, you know, when you hang out with some people and you walk away thinking like I'm prettier or more handsome, you feel smart, you feel good about yourself, you feel like interesting.
They give you energy. They don't drain your energy.
Exactly.
I know what you mean.
And this is like a song. I was thinking about all the people, like when you wake up in the morning, you're like, or you get home at night, you're like, I spend my night with them.
Yeah.
Like I feel crappy now, and that's like the opposite of I think how any of us want to feel. So that was, and then I wrote it, and we recorded the vocals the next day.
So is he like at the synth or like making up a little beat like on the computer? Is that kind of?
And then like with all these people, I'll jump in on certain instruments and play. So really on record, the only things I play, and it depends on the part, because it's always, the rule is sort of like who has the energy of the part, they play it.
Cool.
So like on this Baby Don't Cry, I played the bass line. I'm not a great bass player. Tommy's a much better bass player. But like I had the spirit of the song, and the song's about being yourself.
Yeah.
So like that's the decision there.
That's a great way to be guided in the studio.
You gonna start playing bass on songs?
No, but I mean, like when Arkells record, most of the guitar stuff is Mike, because Mike can do it, I think, better and faster.
Like even your guitar parts you would play live, Mike will do those. In the studio?
Sometimes. But then sometimes I'll like add a part that Mike might typically take. But
Sure.
I'm like, I kind of have this. I feel like I have the spirit of the part.
It's a fascinating philosophy.
Yeah.
It's also different because you're in a band.
Yeah, sure, it's different.
So
yeah.
people have roles, and like you also don't want to be like, you know what, I'm going to play bass on this one.
Yeah.
It's
No.
This is why Ringo quit the Beatles for a week.
Yeah,
'cause
Paul was a
jumped in
better
on
drummer.
drums on Back in the USSR. Ringo laid his tracks down.
I didn't even know that.
Ringo went home, and Paul's like, George Martin, let's keep it rolling. And then he laid. So Paul McCartney on the recording on the White Album of Back in the USSR is Paul McCartney on drums.
Paul also plays drums on the Ballad of John and Yoko. That's just John and Paul.
John and Paul did all the recording. There's no George or Ringo on that record.
You
I did not
it
know
ain't
this.
Easy. Yeah. Crazy.
Well, okay, so that can lead to friction in the band context. So I can't advocate for that, but and yeah, we recorded a version. I recorded the vocals like seated, you know, just like whatever, and then Then I went back on tour.
Yeah.
In revisiting, as I'm beginning to work on the album, everyone's like, "Man, you know, this song's pretty cool." So I was like, well, I have to retrack vocals, and we got to redo. So basically, then we went to LA, because now he was back living in LA. And I redid everything. We redid all this crap. It sucked.
Didn't have the same vibe.
No, it didn't have the same energy at all. And
Bad vibes.
It had bad, you know, it had like, it didn't have like the spirit. It was still good and fine. And so we returned, we added a few different things, and I added layers, and I did some harmonies and things like that. But everything was written just there in that room, and very stream of consciousness. With that song as well, I wrote the first verse in the studio with him. Normally what I do is I take like a little loop, and then I write the rest at home. I usually do a second verse and a bridge at home.
Oh, cool. But getting through that first verse and chorus, that's the hardest shit. Once you get past that, you're like, okay, let's have some fun.
Totally, because you have structure, you have rules.
Yeah.
So that was how that one came about, and that's a pretty consistent process.
Oh, that's cool. It's what's Dan Reynolds like as a A&R guy? Like in terms of like a collaborator to show music to?
Dan's an artist, so he's pretty chill.
And he knows what it's like to be in your shoes, especially.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think he also knows that I'm pretty self-sufficient. So I think he's good at giving me space to do my thing, but is around for advice when I need it, which is kind of honestly the best way to work, because it's not like he's not a dude who feels like he needs to be emailing on a chain to prove that he's working.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Everyone knows that guy's working. Yeah. And working out too.
Yeah.
It's like people there's people in meetings that will say things and everybody will stop and listen. They go, they just said that so that they could talk in this meeting. They didn't really need to say anything, but it was like just so that there'd be a record of that they were there. Whereas it's like, it's always people that are quiet and then they're just like, oh, they're comfortable within themselves. They don't feel the need to be like, reiterate something that didn't need to be said.
Or email chains. I've seen a few of those too.
Yep, sounds good, guys. It's like, okay, that wasn't necessary.
It's like, why? Why are you doing this? Like, have the confidence to just be like engaged, but not inserting yourself. And that's what I think. That's what I really appreciate about Dan. Is like he's not just like out here on email chains, you know.
That's a perfect way to end it.
That's a perfect way to sum that up.
Dan.
No, but I guess to wrap it up, we're going to wrap it up
Yeah,
now.
let's wrap it
We've had you now for a good 44 minutes, but I like that we always go
We
along
could
with you.
talk forever. I feel like we've been talking for 5 minutes.
When it comes down to
We've only been talking for 5
listen, guys, when it comes to PCasts, you're the best. I guess as we wrap it up, what are your hopes for this record? It will be out in July, but people will be excited for it. You'll have 2 singles out, I guess, by the time this comes out.
Yeah, we will have 2 singles out. So Bad Vibes
Is already
and This
out.
Baby Don't Cry. And my hopes for the album are that, you know, I continue to grow the project in the way that it has, which is to say, like, in the honest spirit of like being creative and trying to put a little bit of like good energy into the world. And I think, you know, the last year in particular has been a time for me to really, I feel like the biggest thing that's happened is like a self-possession and self-understanding that's like grounding me and keeping me in a good place where I'm closer to joy in whatever domain that it is, like whether it's my family or my work or even just like my random social life, my like external social life. And I hope that the record allows people to also engage with that. Like This Baby Don't Cry is basically a song about saying like, you want to call me a baby? Fine. That's powerful. It's powerful to be vulnerable. Like the best people who change the world are people who are like vulnerable and open and who aren't afraid to cry. So it's like, yeah, call me a baby. So what? You know, and there's a line in the song where I go, I used to want to say an early goodbye, but I'm a disco queen. I just keep staying alive.
Yeah, I love that line. I was actually just telling Ash about it because I was like, oh, that's a great little reference.
And I think like to me, that's like the spirit of the record. It's just like, you know, everybody feels like quitting or feels like they're at the low point or feels like they've lost the plot. Literally everybody goes through that many times in their life. And it's about having the wherewithal to be resilient and having the support to be resilient, which can be very difficult. And like, that's just life. It's just constantly feeling like you can't do it and then keep doing it. And then good things happen. And then, you know, so this record is a reminder to just like be the disco queen.
Yeah.
In your own life.
Well, I always feel like I'm attracted to earnest, positive music, and I know there's, you know, a lot of very popular music that's angsty and a little angry or cynical. But you know, hearing your new record, which I've had a sneak peek of, and like, you know, have you heard the Lizzo new record?
Yeah,
like,
which I love.
Which I love, and there's actually you guys are cousins or something in that way. Like there's a spirit of like just taking care of yourself, which I think is really powerful and should be heard more often in popular music.
Yeah, and
at least in my opinion, or I not that it should
It's
be.
what you're drawn to.
But I crave that, and I'm glad it exists.
Well, and I do think, and then I will shut up in a sec, but I feel like a big sister. Like a lot of people have commented to me, like just fans, like, yeah, it's kind of like, I think my role in this world of music at this point is like, I'm an adult woman and I'm at a pretty, like, I feel like I've had a pretty decent life and I have good relationships with people that I, over the course of decades. And I think I have some like actual advice and perspective that could be helpful to people.
You've done the trial and error.
I've done the trial and error. And like, when I was 16, 17, I was listening to women in their 30s write songs. And like now I get to be the person potentially that a teenager or any age, of course, but like that's sort of how I feel about this is like, this is my big sis moment and I'm very happy to be there.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you guys.
That was awesome.
You
as
guys are the
always.
best.
Nah, you're the best. Welcome to the dessert. My goodness, it's been so long since we've done a dessert. You just listened to us talk to K.Flay. We're here with our pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham. Shane, what's going on? And because this is kind of like a hybrid of freedom and an actual dessert, we also have Erica, who's still here.
Well, this is kind of like the first dessert of this kind. And this was my father-in-law's idea, by the way.
Ooh, John, shout out.
And he likes to consider himself like Fred Norris from the Howard Stern Show. He's a big Howard Stern fan, as am I. So he told me to let him handle this one for the topic. And he even like wrote some jokes for me to say.
Producer John.
Yeah, but he said not to credit him, but to just say the jokes. But I feel like a loser saying someone else's joke.
Okay.
So I'm going to just click on the article right now. And by the way, the first of anything always sucks. So this dessert is going to kind of suck just because it's the first of its kind.
So
The first freedom.
under the bus.
The first freedom's horrible, but it's the first of something. Okay, so John wants us to talk about that a judge rules that parents of a deceased West Point cadet can use his sperm for surrogate birth.
Wow. Man,
That's interesting.
that is interesting. With no prep. Thoughts?
Yeah, he died in a tragic skiing accident.
Okay. So was
But
it in
his
combat?
parents want to continue his legacy and their family lineage after a New York judge said they can use his frozen sperm to produce a child.
So this guy had been to a sperm bank while he was alive, and this sperm is sitting somewhere. He has the tragic ski accident. The parents want access to the sperm.
Yeah, what 21-year-old's freezing their sperm? Like, that's amazing foresight.
Well, he was in the army.
Yeah,
That
I
could
guess.
be why.
I guess, yeah. That's still
It's a
good
precondition
foresight.
of joining the army.
No, actually, that's probably smart though. If you think you're going
If
to
he,
combat.
if he had like a
of
loved one at
course.
home, if
Yes.
he had like a.
I was thinking about it as
girlfriend or wife.
like a way to check, like how they check your health to join the army. Like you have the proper vision and all that. It's like
So I'm
is it
confused.
as
What
well?
are the jokes?
Well,
coming
John's joke said he.
okay. So we're not actually supposed to discuss this.
Well,
This is
we are. But John wanted me to kind of like off the cuff say like, so how do they extract the sperm? I mean, well, I guess being dead, he's already stiff.
Oh God. Okay. Next subject.
No, I think there's more jokes.
No, that is the subject. Sorry, was I supposed to come up with more? I thought we could just talk about
We'll
this.
discuss this guy.
Okay.
But first of all, was there more jokes? I was just wondering.
And John just added, like, his goal is to give me a bunch of jokes, but this is the first one. So he said, this is a good one on so many levels. It's funny, has moral, ethical issues that could be open to debate. But in
the
the
joke
end,
or the story?
but there's kind of a joke in it. But he goes, but in the end, how wacky are these parents? So, yeah,
sure.
it's a bit of a
Like
joke.
wacky?
Yeah, I guess. He did put wacky in quotations. No, he didn't.
Okay, so obviously this is a bizarre story, so that's why we're having a laugh, even though somebody passed away, which is sad. Okay, let me ask you this. If you guys, say we're like going into a situation where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to come out of this, I'm going to whatever, so you do put your sperm into a sperm bank, how would you feel about your parents or somebody, a girlfriend, a wife, using your sperm to procreate after you're gone?
I think it would be very cool.
You want your legacy out here, even though if you can't sort of partake in the raising of the child.
Yeah, and the surrogate person, I would make sure that I would hope that they would find someone who could create someone as close to me as possible.
Like in the way they raise the kid?
No, just someone who's a lot like my mom was or something, just so you could get that perfect balance where it's actually like another Shane type person.
Yeah, you just want to be cloned, essentially.
Yeah, as close as you can to becoming cloned. Just for the parents who want to have another Shane around.
I've often thought about the idea of like, say they have like some DNA, like a hairbrush from like John Lennon or something like that, and then them because I guarantee we can clone a human right now. It's just obviously ethically and morally there's major issues with that. But let's say that you cloned John Lennon. Is that clone a genius? Or is environment and nurture a factor in whether they actually become like a writer or a singer or anything like that?
I think the latter. I don't think he'd be
You
a
think
genius.
it's environment?
Pardon?
You think it's environment?
Yeah, like if you cloned John Lennon tomorrow, he probably wouldn't even speak English.
Depending on where he grew up, yeah. I mean,
No, but when you clone them, they don't come out as 40-year-olds, right? They come out from babies, and then they kind of learn English
So
the
their
way...
brain is already smart and like developed.
No, I mean,
And, like-
there's definitely some hereditary genes that get passed along that maybe have a predisposition for music. I mean, the Lennon thing, like the way he met McCartney, like that, I don't see being replicated.
But what if you clone McCartney and Lennon?
No. But just Lennon. Like, so you clone Lennon. Clearly, this naturally will have some musical ability. Maybe they're drawn to music. Maybe they're not. Maybe they get into something else. Whatever. Like, do they grow up to achieve great things? Is it inherent in them? Whatever it is.
I mean,
obviously, it's not going to be the same as the Beatles. He's not going to meet McCartney. You know,
he's
the
not going
mom's
to live
not
in
going to
Liverpool.
die
He's
when
not going to be a little
his
ahead
mom
of the
passed
baby
away when he was
boomers.
17.
Yeah, all those formative
There's
things.
a confluence of events that sort of put someone in position to allow their genius to flourish. He won't have those things, but does he still accomplish like great things?
I
you
mean,
know?
Lennon is a funny one because I think the son of John Lennon might just be like sort of an arty, sort of slightly tormented, antagonistic person. If like if you're getting those sensibilities passed down from your parents, which I think you can inherit. I think. Use another example, like a mathematician's son or
Sure.
something. Like, it turns out I'm really good at math. Like, those are there are
But
other
we're not
skills.
talking about sons.
We're
I'm
talking
talking
about
cloning.
clones.
Oh, we're talking about clones.
Yeah,
That's
man.
what I'm
So,
saying.
I thought we were
Like,
talking
I'm
about-
saying, if you literally
sure.
take Abraham Lincoln and clone him, does that baby grow up to accomplish great things?
So if you clone someone, they start as a baby.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
They start.
yeah, it's not. John Lennon doesn't come out of like a fully grown thing. You
can't speak English.
You take the DNA and the biology and you clone it, and then the baby has to grow up, and a baby has to do all this stuff. What I'm wondering is
Like
whatever-
if Kawhi
did
Leonard
not
is
think
if,
that's how it
thank you.
worked.
if Kawhi Leonard is cloned and no one throws him a basketball, would he still be able to become a good basketball
Or
player?
does Kanye West, does he become like a fashion designer if he doesn't get into rap? Or like are these people that we consider exceptional in society, if you were to redo it with everything that's about them physically exactly the same, the brain, all that, you clone it, and they grow up, do they still accomplish great things? Or is it like a confluence of circumstances? Is success luck?
I say both. Like
Yeah.
if I met Paul McCartney when I was 10,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I'm going to write hit songs.
Right.
You have to have that DNA in you to be able to do that. So I think he would still write the hits, but he wouldn't be as successful as the Beatles because that's a 1 in a million.
And a
for all those
combination of all
things.
those people, like a combination of all their talent is luck, obviously,
Yep.
and like opportunities that arose for them. So could you create that same sort of
Yeah. Well, it'd be an interesting experiment.
amount of luck for their
Because it's
clones?
like if you raise that clone in an isolated environment, I'd just be very fascinated to see what they're actually naturally drawn to, and if they actually, you know what I mean?
I'm
Like,
sure we'll find out one of these days.
I believe, and I think there are probably clones amongst us.
They've
Not
cloned
like our
lambs.
age. But like I think that somewhere in the world somebody has already started the process of cloning humans, and there might be a 3-year-old walking around that is a clone of somebody that obviously is like outlawed in a lot of places, and there's certain like restrictions. But I feel like science and progress and like people that are into that kind of thing probably couldn't stop themselves from trying. Like, I mean, we cloned a sheep, Dolly.
Yeah.
There's an amazing podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast with Jamie Metzel. It's from a couple weeks ago, and this guy's like an AI expert, like technology expert, and they get into this subject and it blows your mind. I highly recommend that episode.
Interesting.
But back to the matter at hand.
Is that another whack-off joke?
My question is: do these parents expect to have like a grandfather relationship with with the kid when the kid is born? Like, are they going to choose a single mom, or like I guess parents that can't conceive to be like, hey, we're also the
question.
grandparents because you have our kid's DNA? Is
Well,
that made clear?
you could pay a surrogate to carry the child, but you do need to find an egg. So basically,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So then is the egg a part of the surrogate, and then the surrogate's like, yep, take my, like, I will birth the baby with my egg being the other half of the equation, or do you get an egg donor You get the sperm donor, and then you find the third party to basically bring the baby to term.
Yeah.
Like they'd have to work out the details, but I imagine these parents want to raise it like their own child. I don't
like
think
their own or like their own grandchild.
Well, I don't know. Like, did this guy have a girlfriend? Did the soldier have a girlfriend? Is that who they're hoping would like bring the baby to
Does
term?
not say in this article.
Right.
Did they ever have a discussion with him while he was alive if they were okay with this happening?
Doesn't say here.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting.
Big questions.
I doubt it. It's like, hey, in the event you die, we still want to have a grandkid. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
Would you want this done to you,
No,
man?
definitely not. I always assume that I say this to Lauren sometimes. Like if we ever like I don't want it. If there's one reason why I don't want to have a kid, it's just like I just assume the kid's gonna get all my shitty character traits. I feel like Lauren has much better genes than I do. And I just like don't get me involved.
But you have very good character traits as well.
Yeah.
Don't you think those
I know.
will
I
pass
just
on?
assume they'll get all the shit ones.
Right.
Well, what's your shitty character trait?
Lots. I don't
Name
get into
one.
it. No, there's lots of bad shit.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting to me because I've heard you say this many times over drinks, but it's like you're such a positive person in general, I feel like. You sort of always envision the best possible outcome, but in this specific case, you envision the absolute worst outcome.
Yeah, you know what it is? I think I've seen enough movies or read stories about kids that come from like really good backgrounds. And I have friends actually that had a really hard time despite the fact they like had awesome parents and raised in like really grounded middle class sort of circumstances and still had a really hard time with life. And I think the idea of like your kid like becoming a drug addict or schizophrenic or like and being really sad and living a tough existence, I was like, I don't want to put myself through that. That's where my mind goes when it comes to having a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I also don't care about my legacy at all either. Like I don't care about seeing another little me. I mean, I'm sure I'll have a kid one day. I'm like, this is the best. Like I'm sure I will love it with and when that day comes. But but it's not a thing that I'm like, oh, I can't wait to pass my family name on. That's just like not something. And like my dad's not like that at all, even though he clearly did it.
But isn't that why people want to become famous and write hit songs so their legacy kind of lasts forever?
No, I do it for the Raptors tickets.
Oh, okay.
That's it. That's all. That is our episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to K.Flay for coming on. This was our first hybrid of sort of like a conventional episode in Freedom. Max, I thought it went all right.
Thanks to producer John for figuring out a dessert for us.
Yeah, it was a big shout out to John.
Next one will be better, though.
I thought it was fun. That was actually, Johnny, that was a great topic.
Yeah, there's also I like having to think on your feet there because usually we give ourselves a little bit of prep on the subject, but this was cool.
Yeah, man, doing it loose and fast. Thank you so much for tuning in. The Mike and Much podcast is produced by Max Kerriman. I'm your host, Mike Veerman. See you next week if we don't die on the weekend. And if we do not make a baby from my sperm.
Mike on Much can be found on Twitter and Instagram at Mike on Much. You can subscribe to the show on any platform that has podcasts. Spotify, do it.